All right, buckle up, folks, because we're about to delve into some pretty heavy stuff. We're talking missing persons.
Yeah, it's a tough topic, but an important one. And, just to throw a number out there right off the bat, 379
379 what?
new cases of missing persons in Pakistan just in 2024.
Wow. That's a pretty significant number.
It is, and it really highlights the human cost behind these statistics, right?
Yeah.
Each one represents a life, a family left wondering.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to unpack today. The why, the where, and the who, if we can.
Exactly, and thankfully we have some solid information to work with. This report from DAWN.com really digs into the issue, citing data from the COIOED, which is the Commission of Inquiry on Enforced Disappearances in Pakistan.
Right, and it's that term enforced disappearances that makes this even more concerning. This is just something more systematic, more sinister perhaps than just people going missing.
Exactly. It implies state involvement, whether directly or indirectly, and a deliberate attempt to cover things up.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar, can you give us a little more context on what exactly constitutes an enforced disappearance?
Sure. So in a nutshell, it's when someone is taken, usually by state agents or groups acting with the state's knowledge, and then their whereabouts are concealed. The authorities basically refuse to acknowledge that they've detained the person or provide any information about their fate.
So it's not just about people going missing, it's about a lack of transparency and accountability.
Precisely. Now, the COIOED was set up back in 2011 specifically to investigate these cases, try to locate the missing individuals, and where possible, identify those responsible.
Okay, so let's dive into the numbers then. You mentioned 379 new cases in 2024. That's just in 1 year.
Yeah, and while that's concerning on its own, what's interesting is to look at it alongside the number of cases the commission was able to close or dispose of in that same year, which was 427.
So they actually resolved more cases than they received. Does that mean things are, I don't know, maybe getting a little better?
Well, it's tempting to think so, but we got to zoom out a bit to get the full picture. When we look at the total number of cases the COIOED has received since its inception up until the end of 2024, that number jumps to 10,467.
Well, over 10,000.
Yeah, that puts those 379 new cases in 2024 into perspective. So out of those 10,467 cases, how many do you think have been officially resolved?
I'm going to guess something like maybe half.
Not quite, but it's a significant chunk. A total of 8,216 cases have been disposed of as of this report.
Okay, so what does disposed of actually mean in this context? Does it mean all those people were found?
Not necessarily. That's where it gets a bit tricky. While disposed of might sound positive, it doesn't always translate to a happy ending.
Right, because you mentioned some pretty grim possibilities earlier.
Exactly. So of those 8,216 disposed cases, 6,599 individuals were actually traced.
Okay, that's good news at least, right?
Yeah, a majority were found, which is a positive sign. Hopefully they were reunited with their families.
Hopefully. What about the rest?
Well, that's where the picture gets a little darker. 1,617 cases were closed without the person ever being traced.
So almost 20% of the closed cases still don't have answers. That's a lot of families left in limbo, even after the case is officially closed.
Absolutely. And it really underscores the ongoing struggle to bring closure and justice to these families. But it's not just about those closed cases. There are also those that are still active. As of the end of 2024, the COIOED still had 2,251 cases pending.
Wow, so there's a massive backlog.
There is, and it speaks to the scale of this problem, you know? It's not going away anytime soon.
Absolutely. Now, I know the report also gave a breakdown of where those who were traced were actually found. And I have to say, that was pretty revealing.
Yeah, it gives us a glimpse into the different realities behind these disappearances. So of the 6,599 individuals traced, a majority, 4,613, were found to have returned home, which is, of course, the best possible outcome.
Yes, absolutely.
But a significant number were found in other locations that raise a whole host of concerns. 1,011 were located in internment centers, 687 were in prisons, and tragically, 288 were found deceased.
It's heartbreaking to think about.
It really is. And it just goes to show that there's no single narrative here. Each disappearance has its own unique story, its own set of circumstances.
That's not. Now, I know the report also zooms in on December 2024, just to give a more recent snapshot. Anything stand out to you from that month's data?
Well, what's striking is that even in that single month, 29 new cases were reported. So it's clear that this is an ongoing issue, not just something from the past.
Right, and they managed to close 44 cases in that same month.
Yeah, but again, we got to remember that closed doesn't always mean solved. Out of those 44, 10 were deemed to be unrelated to enforced disappearances. So it seems like the commission also handles a broader range of missing persons cases.
Interesting. So maybe they're dealing with more than just state-related disappearances.
Possibly. And then, out of those December cases, 23 people were thankfully found to have returned home. But there were also 5 individuals found in internment centers, 4 in jails, and sadly, 2 bodies were recovered.
It really drives home the point that this is not just a statistic. It's about real people, real lives affected.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to how the different branches of government are approaching this issue, because it's clear that finding solutions is a complex undertaking. The DAWN.com report highlighted some recent statements from the Supreme Court, which are quite interesting.
Yeah, the constitutional bench of the Supreme Court, basically the highest judicial authority in Pakistan, made some pretty strong pronouncements about who they believe should be taking the lead in addressing enforced disappearances.
And they pointed the finger, or rather the responsibility, squarely at Parliament.
Yeah, I remember Justice Jamal Khan Mandakayal's statement being quite direct, something along the lines of, Parliament needs to step up.
Yeah, he didn't mince words. He said the solution to this problem is to be found by Parliament. And then he went on to say, the court has always recognized Parliament as the supreme body, and now it is for Parliament to prove it so.
That's a pretty clear message, right? It's like they're saying, look, we've done what we can, now it's your turn to take action.
Exactly. They're essentially emphasizing that the legislative branch is the one that needs to create the necessary legal framework to properly address this issue.
Makes sense. Now, the report also shared the perspective of Law Minister Azam Nazir Tarar. What was his take on it all?
Well, he acknowledged the complexity of the issue, saying that it can't be solved overnight. But he did express the government's commitment to finding a solution, a consensus-based one, which suggests they're looking for broad agreement among stakeholders.
So he's recognizing the challenges, but also emphasizing the need for collaboration.
Right. He's not downplaying the difficulties. And he also brought up another layer of complexity, Pakistan's geopolitical situation.
Yes. Pakistan's long history as a frontline state in a region that's been grappling with conflict for decades. How did he tie that into the issue of missing persons?
He argued that the volatile situation in neighboring countries has basically further exacerbated internal challenges, as he put it. So he's saying that the external security environment is playing a role. It's not just about internal factors.
Okay, so he's highlighting the regional context as an added layer of complexity. Anything else?
Yes, he also made a point of mentioning the sacrifices that both the people and the armed forces of Pakistan have made in the fight against terrorism.
He talked about the unbelievable price that's been paid.
Right, and his argument was that these sacrifices need to be considered when searching for solutions to the missing persons issue.
Okay, so he's basically saying that national security concerns can't be ignored when addressing this issue. And of course, we're just relaying his perspective as presented in the article, not endorsing any particular viewpoint.
Precisely. Now, I know this is a lot to take in, but as our listeners process all this information from the DAWN.com report, what would you say are the key takeaways?
Well, first and foremost, it's clear that the issue of missing persons in Pakistan is far from resolved. The numbers speak for themselves. There's a huge backlog of cases. New ones are still being reported.
Absolutely. And we can't forget the human element here. Every single case represents a life disrupted, a family in anguish, and the diverse circumstances of those who are traced, some returning home, others found in detention or worse, highlights the complexity of this issue.
It's not a black and white situation. And as we've seen, there are differing opinions on how to move forward, from the Supreme Court putting the pressure on Parliament to the law minister emphasizing the need for a collaborative approach and acknowledging the broader security context.
So for our listeners, I think some key questions to ponder would be, what is the most effective way to address this problem? Is it primarily through legislative action, as the judiciary suggests, or does it require a more nuanced approach that takes into account the regional security situation, as the executive branch seems to be advocating? This DAWN.com article really serves as a springboard for deeper reflection on human rights, governance, and the intricate security dynamics at play in Pakistan.
And to leave you with a final thought, consider this. We've explored the data, heard different perspectives, but ultimately, what do you believe is the most critical next step in addressing this issue? And what role can different segments of society play? Lawmakers, government agencies, civil society organizations, individuals. Everyone has a part to play, don't they? It's a multifaceted problem that demands a multifaceted solution.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive has hopefully provided some valuable context and food for thought.
Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again for our next deep dive.